There are places where the shadows don't just move, they whisper. The storm had been relentless. Daniel gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white, as his car skidded along the deserted road. The GPS flickered, lost in the storm's interference. The only sign of life was the towering silhouette of Blackwood Manor ahead. It was meant to be a simple favor, check on an old friend. A historian named Professor James Alden, who had gone silent after sending a frantic message. But some doors should never be opened. Daniel parked outside the manor's wrought iron gates. The house loomed before him, its windows dark and lifeless. As he stepped out, the rain soaked through his jacket instantly. The gates let out a slow, agonized creak as he pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and something else, something rotten. The grand chandelier flickered as if struggling against an unseen force. You shouldn't have come. Daniel froze, he turned, but the door behind him had shut on its own. He tried the handle, locked. The storm raged outside, but within the manor, an eerie stillness settled. A single candle flickered on a nearby table, casting long, dancing shadows.
Hello, Professor Alden?
No answer, only the soft sound of footsteps, but they weren't his. Clocks came louder and louder. Daniel took a hesitant step forward, his shoes echoing in the vast emptiness. The walls were lined with portraits, their painted eyes following him. He felt a cold breath against his neck, spinning around nothing. Pounded. Something was wrong with this place. The darkness wasn't just absence of light. It was alive, and it was watching. Low growl from the shadows. A faint shuffle came from the end of the hallway. Daniel's breath hitched. He turned his head slowly, his eyes straining in the dim light. The shadows pooled unnaturally in the corridor, stretching towards him. Hello? Who's there? Who's there? Nevrin burst to his phone, but the screen glitched, static swallowing his desperate attempt at light. His pulse hammered in his ears as he took slow steps forward. Then something brushed against his arm, cold, brittle, like fingers. He spun, his breath coming in short gasps. Nothing, just the silence, the flickering candle, and the deep, unrelenting dark.
Some secrets refuse to stay buried.
Daniel's hands trembled as he raised the candle higher. The shadows recoiled, slithering back into the corners of the hallway. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen, something waiting.
Daniel, help me.
He spun toward the sound. It had come from the staircase ahead, winding up into darkness. The old wooden steps groaned under his hesitant footfalls.
Just a trick of the mind. The storm. The old house.
But his gut told him otherwise. As he reached the landing, a gust of icy air rushed past, snuffing out the candle. He cursed under his breath, heart hammering. A door creaked open ahead, just a sliver of darkness beyond.
Professor Alden.
Daniel swallowed hard.
He stepped forward, forcing his breathing steady. He reached for the door, pushing it open.
Daniel.
A figure sat in the chair by the window, its back turned to him. Rain lashed against the glass, lightning illuminating the room in brief flashes. The chair creaked as the figure shifted slightly.
Professor.
The figure began to turn, slow, deliberate. But before he could see its face, the door behind him slammed shut.
You shouldn't have come, Daniel.
Daniel stumbled backward, slamming into the wall. The figure had disappeared, but something was still in the room with him. His breath came in ragged gasps. The room grew colder. A single whisper crawled through the darkness, curling around his ears.
It sees you. It knows you. It's waiting.
Double, what do you want?
The whispering stopped. A deep silence filled the air. Then, a hand clamped onto his shoulder.
Sudden, sharp gasp, cut to silent.
Daniel squeezed his eyes shut. This wasn't real. This wasn't happening. But the grip on his shoulder tightened, ice-cold fingers digging into his skin.
Stay forever.
When the past calls, will you answer? Daniel's breath hitched as the hand on his shoulder gripped tighter, his pulse pounded against his skull. He wrenched himself free, stumbling forward into the darkness. The door slammed behind him, the air turning thick and suffocating. He wasn't alone. Who's there? The room was barely lit, the single candle on the table flickering against the damp walls. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting as if alive. In the corner, an antique mirror stood, its glass fogged over. Professor Alden. Silence answered him. Then, faintly, a whispering sound. Not words, but something else. Something old. Daniel turned toward the mirror, dread coiling in his stomach. As he stepped closer, the glass slowly cleared. His reflection stared back, breath fogging up the surface, but then it moved. Not in sync. It was a second too slow. No, that's not me. The reflection's mouth opened, but Daniel wasn't speaking. His own voice, distorted and wrong, seeped from the glass. Daniel, you shouldn't have come. What are you? The candle blew out. Cold air rushed past him. In the shattered mirror's fragments, he saw glimpses of something moving behind him, something too tall, too thin, watching. I need to get out of here. Daniel backed away. His heart beat a frantic drum against his ribs. The whispering grew louder, voices layering upon each other. It watches. It waits. It remembers. He spun around. The door was shaking, as if someone was on the other side. Slowly, a single shadow crept under the gap at the bottom. Who's there? Daniel had no choice. He lunged for the window, but as he did, the door burst open. Nothing, the hallway beyond was empty. What is happening to me? His breath came in short gasps. Then, just as he stepped back into the hall, the whispers stopped, replaced by something worse. It's right behind me. When you listen too closely, you hear things you were never meant to.
Daniel's breath shuddered as he stood frozen. The silence in the hallway was absolute. Too absolute. A stillness that didn't belong to the living. He could feel something just behind him, its presence pressing against his spine.
Slowly, he
turned.
Nothing. Only the dimly lit corridor stretching into darkness, but the air was charged, electric with an unseen weight. He knew he wasn't alone.
Keep moving.
The hallway seemed longer than before, impossibly so. Portraits lined the walls, figures with empty eyes, their gazes heavy on his back. He walked, his footsteps muffled against the thick rug beneath him. Ahead, the corridor split into two paths. The left led deeper into darkness, while the right flickered with a faint glow. The decision felt important.
Right, always follow the light.
He turned, stepping toward the glow. But as he moved forward, the whispering began again.
He's coming. He's coming. He's coming. Who's coming?
The whispers didn't answer. Instead, they grew frantic, overlapping, urgent. Run, run, run. Daniel bolted. The hallway stretched and twisted, the walls seeming to bend inward as he ran. The light ahead pulsed, dimming with each step. The air thickened, as if something enormous was pressing down upon him. The floor tilted beneath his feet, sending him crashing to his knees. The light ahead sputtered out. Darkness swallowed him whole. No, no, no. Then suddenly, he was standing. He wasn't sure how the hallway was gone in its place. He stood in a vast circular room. At its center, a single chair, and sitting in it,
Professor Alding.
The old man's head lolled forward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His hands twitched in his lap.
Should have never come here, Daniel.
Sudden, the walls trembled, the portraits melted into shadows, and behind the professor, a shape unfolded, tall, thin, its presence draining the air from the room.
It sees me.
Daniel's body refused to move. The professor reached out, his fingers curling around Daniel's wrist. His grip was ice. The room fractured around him. The chair collapsed into itself, the professor's body disintegrating into wisps of darkness that twisted upward, vanishing into the shadows above. The walls pulsed, shifting like living flesh as the whispers returned, now deafening.
He sees. He sees. He sees.
Sudden silence, then a heartbeat, slow and heavy. Daniel stumbled back, his chest rising and falling in sharp gasps. The space where the professor sat was now empty, except a single figure stood in the darkness. Who are you? The figure did not move. Its shape was human yet featureless, smooth where eyes should be, a hollow absence where a mouth should open. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated just beyond normal proportions. Stay back. The figure obeyed for a moment. Then, without warning, it lunged. Daniel fell backward, his hands scraping against the cold stone floor. The figure loomed over him, its hollow face tilting, considering him. Then finally it spoke, not with words, but with every voice Daniel had ever known. Speaking at once. "You are not supposed to be here. What are you?" The hollow man reached forward, its fingers passed through Daniel's chest, not touching but pulling. The sensation was unbearable, like his very essence was being unraveled, his vision blurred, darkness creeping at the edges. "Daniel, wake up, wake up." A sudden force yanked him backward, the world around him shattered like glass, and then he was somewhere else. Gentle rain, distant thundering. Daniel gasped, his body hitting the ground hard. Grass, cold, wet, real. He blinked rapidly, his chest rising and falling. He was no longer in that room, no longer facing the hollow man. Where am I? He was outside. The vast expanse of Ravenswood Manor loomed ahead, its windows dark and watching, but he wasn't alone. A woman stood a few feet away, her face hidden beneath a tattered hood. "You shouldn't have come back, Daniel."
The wind picked up, whipping through the trees. The woman's hood slipped back slightly, revealing hollowed cheeks and eyes rimmed with shadows. She looked both young and impossibly old, her gaze piercing into him. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the manor. "It's not done with you yet." Daniel flinched as the storm intensified, the sky above swirling like ink spilling into water. He turned toward the manor, feeling its pull, its silent demand. Whatever had started inside wasn't over. It sees. It waits. A choice lay before him: turn away and run, or step back into the unknown. I have to know the truth. Slow, deliberate footsteps approaching. Daniel walking forward. The woman's expression didn't change, but her eyes darkened, filled with something that looked almost like sorrow. "Then may the Hollow Man have mercy on you." Wind rustling violently. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped forward. The storm raged behind him, but the path to the manor was unnaturally still. As he approached the towering doors, they groaned, then slowly swung open on their own. This place, it's alive. He hesitated before stepping inside. The air was thick, suffocating. The grand chandelier above flickered, casting twisted shadows along the walls. The whispers returned, slithering through the silence like a warning. Daniel, turn back." Ignoring them, he moved deeper into the manor. The entrance hall stretched impossibly long, lined with portraits of figures whose faces had been scratched away. What is this place really hiding? A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind him. What the? The air grew colder. A presence loomed, unseen but undeniable. Then, the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the halls, slow measured, coming closer. Someone's here, or something. Daniel turned a corner, his breath catching as he saw a dimly lit study. Books lay scattered on the floor, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. An old wooden desk stood at the center of the room, its surface covered in deep claw marks. Someone peering. A single book remained untouched at the desk's center, bound in cracked leather. Its cover bore no title, only a symbol carved into the surface, a hollow circle. A journal. As he reached for it, the air in the room changed. The temperature dropped further, and the chandelier above swayed despite the absence of wind. Then, "Daniel, don't read it." "Professor." He spun around, but the room was empty, heart pounding. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the journal's cover. The pages seemed to pulse beneath his touch, as if something inside was waiting. "I have to know." He flipped the cover open. The pages were filled with frantic, scrawled handwriting. "That's not a myth. He is not a ghost. He is watching, waiting, and once you see him, the rest is smudged out." "Something's here!" The knocking came again, this time from inside the study. The shadows in the corners stretched unnaturally long. Daniel's pulse raced as he slowly backed toward the door. No. Then, silence. Daniel looked up. The study was gone. He stood in a new space, a circular stone chamber, torches lining the walls. At the room's center stood a tall, thin figure, waiting. The Hollow Man. It's real. The stone chamber pulsed with an unnatural energy. The torches flickered, casting long, twitching shadows against the walls. Daniel's breath came in shallow bursts as he forced himself to move forward. Where am I? The Hollow Man did not answer. He
stood motionless, his presence stretching beyond the boundaries of the room. His face, if it could be called that, was a void, shifting, as if reality itself was unsure how to hold him. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He had come too far to run now.
What do you want from me?
The hollow man tilted his head. The air trembled, fear creeping in. "Answer me!" The whispering grew louder. The torches flared, then extinguished, plunging the chamber into total darkness. Daniel's heart pounded. The void stretched around him. No walls, no floor, just endless nothingness. Then a voice deep and resonant filled the space. "You called me Daniel, and now you belong to me." A force yanked Daniel forward. He struggled, but there was no escaping it. The darkness swallowed him whole. "No!" The chamber was gone. The manor was gone. Only the hollow man remained. "Help me." Daniel gasped for breath, his body weightless, drifting. Then, just as suddenly as it had vanished, the floor returned beneath his feet, cold stone, rough, real. A light flickered in the distance, a single candle, casting long shadows across the vast chamber. The hollow man stood motionless, his form shifting, tall, thin, and faceless. "What do you want from me?" "To listen." "Rising." "Over." The shadows trembled as whispers filled the chamber. They were everywhere, surrounding him, pushing into his mind. Daniel clutched his head. The words weren't spoken, but they echoed inside his skull. "Stop!" Hollow Man lifted a hand, fingers impossibly long. He pointed toward the candle, and as if pulled by an unseen force, Daniel turned to face it. "What is this?" The candle's flame flickered violently, revealing something behind it. A mirror, old, cracked, its surface rippling like water, and in its reflection, he saw himself, but not as he was. "No! That's not me!" The reflection was twisted, sunken eyes, hollow skin, lips moving without sound. It wasn't just a reflection. It was something else. "No!" The mirror exploded outward. Shards of glass hung in the air, reflecting endless versions of himself, each one different, each one wrong. The hollow man stepped forward. "It's time." The void pulsed around Daniel, an endless, suffocating darkness. The hollow man's presence was everywhere, inside his thoughts, beneath his skin, pressing against his very soul. Daniel tried to move, but his body wasn't his own anymore. His limbs felt weightless, detached, as if they belonged to something else. "You sought the truth, now you carry it." Sharp, piercing ring, like metal scraping on stone. "No! I didn't want this! Let me go!" Something cracked beneath him, like a splintering mirror. Suddenly, light erupted, pale, cold, unnatural. He was back inside the manor, but it wasn't the same. Distant was stretched overly high. The furniture was wrong, twisted versions of itself, shifting and pulsing like living things. The grand chandelier above dangled at a precarious angle, its crystals dripping something black. "This isn't real. It can't be real." A slow, deliberate knock echoed through the hall, 3 times deep and resonant. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He turned toward the great oak doors. They creaked open on their own. Beyond them stretched a spiraling staircase that hadn't been there before, leading down into the abyss.
Down, down, down. What's waiting for me down there?
The Hollow Man's voice slithered into his ear.
The end.
Hodden rush of air. Daniel stumbled down the first step. The air thickened, pressing against him. The deeper he descended, the louder the whispers became, forming words he almost understood. Warnings, pleas, secrets never meant to be known.
I won't stop. I need to finish this.
At the staircase's bottom stood a massive iron door, its surface carved with the same hollow circle from the professor's journal. It vibrated as if holding something back. Daniel placed his hand against the door. The metal burned cold, searing into his palm. Then, a single whisper, clear, direct, cut through the others.
Daniel, don't open it. Simon Sharp, next look.
His breath hitched. He knew that voice.
Professor Alden.
Before he could react, the door lurched open on its own.
Wind, whispers, and something else waking up.
No!
The world around Daniel twisted violently. Shadows peeled away, revealing glimpses of the manor, the study, the storm outside. But nothing held reality, flickered like a dying flame. The Hollow Man loomed before him, impossibly tall, his presence suffocating. He lifted one skeletal hand, and Daniel felt his body seize, trapped, weightless in the void. You sought the truth now. You become part of it. Daniel fought to move, to breathe, but the Hollow Man's grasp tightened, not on his body, but on his mind. Memories unraveled, thoughts dissolving into whispers. He was slipping away. No, I won't. Something pushed back, a pulse of resistance deep within him, his own mind fighting against the pull. He focused, grasping at the memories the Hollow Man sought to erase: the manor, the journal, the storm, the woman in the woods. The Hollow Man flinched, his form wavered, his grip faltering. Daniel seized the moment. This is my mind, not yours. The void cracked apart. Light erupted, blinding and pure. The Hollow Man recoiled, his form unraveling into strands of darkness, shrieking as the light consumed him. Daniel gasped, collapsing onto a cold wooden floor. The study, he was back. The journal lay open beside him, the ink now dry and lifeless. He stood, trembling. The manor was silent. Empty the air felt. Lighter, as if something dark had been lifted. It's over. A chill ran down his spine. He turned. The study door stood open beyond it. The hallway stretched into darkness. Or is it? Or is it? You've heard the whispers, but the story isn't over.
Subscribe now, before the Hollow Man finds you.